Welcome to Shop Talks Live. I'm doing an intro live here with Dan Faia because I will be posting this tomorrow morning and I won't have time to do my normal fancy-dancy mixing and all that. But so we're going to go a little bit of old school. Dan, thanks for having me in the shop.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ben. I'm happy to be here.
So we just finished up, probably. I think we finished up.
Hope so.
The 9th day.
Yeah, 9 shoots. Yep.
Of shooting for a video workshop series. You building a cabrio. Why do I keep saying that?
Yeah, because the cabrio legs are the feature, right? That's what it looks. That's the look.
You building a Queen Anne chair.
Queen Anne chair. Yep.
But I mean, there are things more exciting than spending 9 days in your shop with me. Going
I don't know. It's pretty exciting.
So. It's a lovely day here in Rollinsford, New Hampshire.
Beautiful.
Windows are open, and we're just going to roll with it.
Yep.
You recently were awarded the Cartouche Award.
Yeah, from the Society of American Furniture Makers. I got nominated by a couple of friends of mine, Matt Wada and Art LeMan, and I was fortunate enough to win. Actually, this week, or actually next week, next Friday evening, I'll actually be given the award in person down at their mid-year conference in New Bern, North Carolina. So I will physically get awarded it next Friday.
I didn't know it was this soon.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the Cartouche Award for those who don't know?
Yeah, so this Society of American Furniture Makers has been a group that's been around for a long time. They basically, their mission is to support and educate and keep the craft of period furniture going. And the award itself is really to recognize folks who have made a contribution to the furniture and the education and the promotion of that craft. And many of my mentors have won. So my friend Alan Breed has won. Phil Lowe was a friend, won. Will Neptune, and many others too. But it's pretty esteemed company, and it's very humbling that I even was nominated. But to win it is a big deal. It means a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it.
I always describe it to people as like a Grammy Award of woodworking. Because let's be honest, woodworking doesn't have too many awards going out.
No, right? Exactly.
In the grander scheme of woodworking, I guess there's shows with prizes or whatever.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like even to have a group of folks that want to acknowledge something that you've actually just, it's your work, it's your career, it's your trade, and something that you love, and to be recognized for just working. Yeah. Is pretty remarkable.
So let's talk about the career for a little bit, because you've done an awful lot for a dude who's not real old.
Yeah.
You go all the way back. You worked with Phil. Mm-hmm. You worked with who was the Windsor chair maker?
Mike Dunbar.
Mike Dunbar.
Yep.
And you were at North Bennett Street School. Yep. Teaching for how long?
I've taught in the full-time program for 16 years and was department head for 13 of those 16.
Wow. Yeah. So, and now we're here in your new shop.
Yep.
Where you are
pretty much kind of on the same page. I have always been interested in building commission work. I've always been interested in working with students and teaching everything from amateur to aspiring professionals. And that's really what I want to continue. Like I've been reflecting, the Cartouche Award's been a really good reflection point time for me, is that, okay, this is kind of the 30-year mark for me. From when I started professionally to where I am today. So this is like the reflection point of what I want to do in my next 30 years. Like, I don't know if I have 30 left, but we're going to hope that we do. And in that, I want to take this to another level. I want to take it to a personal level. I want to have a small shop experience. I want to make sure I can offer really good information at a really high level for anybody who's interested in learning, but also balance that out by being able to do work and do commissions and just be active. I've done quite a bit of work with fine woodworking over the years in the magazine. This is my first video stint, and I really appreciate your patience with that with me. But I feel like just from the amount of work that I've been involved with, whether it's just been teaching or just been building or collaborative work, I feel like I have a lot of information to share. And for me to find different avenues and venues to do this, that's my goal.
So you're doing smaller. I mean, this is a beautiful. This is one of my favorite shops I've been in. It's a beautiful shop, but it's not necessarily what I think of when I think of woodworking school.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was pretty intentional, was it?
Yeah. So, you have larger workshop style classes or woodworking schools where there's multiple people, multiple benches. Really what I wanted to make sure is it had a feel of individuality, meaning that when a student walks through this door and they see that there's 5 benches in this room, that's it. That's the cap. Most classes have 4, maybe 5 at the max, because through all the teaching that I've done, the more people there are, it's great. It's fun and it's collaborative and people have a good time, but the individualized attention gets shrunk down a little bit. So I really wanted to make sure that woodworkers at every level, whether they're just beginning or whether they've been at it for a little while, even if they're in the same workshop, that I can give them what they need in that moment at either a basic level or a high level, and hopefully be able to inspire them to go to the next level.
So also, I mean, a major difference is there's no table saw in here. There's no jointer in here.
Yep.
No planer.
Yep.
What gives?
I have friends with joiners, planers, and table saws. All right, that'll be the honest truth.
Yeah.
But no, really, most of my work is based around hand tools. It's what I do in commission work, and it's what I kind of favor in teaching. There are a ton of places to learn woodworking. There's a lot of really good teachers out there, and why would somebody want to make the trip to Rollinsford, New Hampshire to take a class? Hopefully it's information that's a little bit more specialized or a little unique with the wood carving or whatever it might be, that is not the common denominator through all the woodworking schools. Most places have how to use a table saw, what's the favorite fixture, how to do this stuff, and whatever. So it's like my philosophy is, you don't need to come to me to learn how to rip on a table saw.
Okay.
But you want to come to me, hopefully, if you're interested in learning how to make a Queen Anne chair or something like that.
Or a pie crust table.
Or pie crust, just learn the basics of wood carving.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be super complicated, but really, my main focus is I want it to be about the information. Hopefully we make something nice and people are proud of the work that they did, but at the end of the class, it's not about what they made, it's about what they learned, right? So that's the focus, is the information. So my shop is really, if you look around, it's a large bench room. That's what it looks like. It has small, woodworking equipment as necessary, but it's geared towards kind of that hand tool woodworker. And I kind of flavor it as if folks are in that kind of in between, they're kind of getting going, they like hand tool woodworking, they need some machinery. It's kind of like small, what's the right way to say it? Small workshop building. You can do a lot with very little.
Yeah.
When I started out professionally, I couldn't afford to buy all the machinery, so I bought what I needed. So I started with a bench grinder and a bandsaw. I needed to be able to sharpen my tools, and a bandsaw can rip, it can cut curves, it can do all those things. So I got pretty good at the bandsaw. And then I could afford a planer. I bought a little lunchbox planer. I couldn't afford a joiner, so I flattened everything by hand and sent it through the planer. So anyways, there's ways to think about the work that you're trying to create. You don't want to waste time. I don't want to be hand milling boards. It's crazy for me to do that. But having the skills to be able to do things, like I have a project in the shop now that when I actually have to mill that top, which is but right now the rough board's 25 inches wide. I don't have any equipment in this building that I can go flatten and mill. So I'm going to hand plane it.
Matt doesn't even have anything
Nope.
else? Okay.
Nope.
If Matt doesn't have it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So All right, let's talk about real quickly. We've got questions from listeners to answer here, but I really want to talk about all of the various things. So you made Windsor chairs with Mike.
Yep.
For how long?
5.5 years ish.
And taught classes while doing that.
Oh yeah.
How old were you?
Oh boy, you're gonna make me do math. That was probably about 18 years, so late 20s.
Okay. And this was after you attended North Bennett Street?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of my time frame. I graduated North Bennett in '94, and actually, like the folks that really got me into the educational track, Will Neptune, who kind of got the workshop program going at North Bennett. He brought me into the fold early on to just kind of assist classes and kind of build me as an instructor, along with some of the others too. And then as the programming started to grow, at that time period, the only places really teaching in the Massachusetts, there were other places, but the two main commodities were North Bennett and woodcraft. That was it. There was not a lot of other options. It was kind of the starting point of the workshop program. But Will kind of got that going, and then as that grew, the workshop directors had changed at the time. But Janet Collins is a graduate of ours, and she's done a lot of work. She was workshop director for a long time. She kind of brought it to the next level, and she helped foster a lot of folks that were trying to be creative, create new workshops. So she took it on to be able to invest in people to kind of grow as teachers and build up, And then from that point, like I said, I started getting, and I think because of that teaching experience is how I got to teach with Mike. Mm-hmm. And then teaching with Mike, you know what I mean? So one thing led to another, and just the networking value of different things. And then when Phil opened his school, I got to go back and work with Phil a little bit here and there, teaching workshops.
So you studied with Phil.
So Phil hadn't started his school. I had graduated North Bennett. We became friendly. We actually worked a couple of jobs together. He did some turning for me on a project. I had my shop was in Swampscott, Mass. His shop was in Beverly, Mass. At that point. And how we started, really how I started working for Phil was he had a ton of repair work. He had some really nice stuff, and then he had just chairs to glue together, like just the base, and he had a whole room full of that stuff. And I would go over there, and we would pull out as many pieces as we could put in my truck. We'd pull it out and say, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done, this has to be done. We'd put a price tag on it. I would take it back to my shop and bring it back done. And we went through that whole room of furniture and got it all repaired. And he's like, okay, now all of this is good stuff. You have to come into the shop for this. So then I got into the fold part-time and started working part-time in the shop with him and some other employees that he had at that point doing the repair work. But then whatever came in, so we did architectural millwork. I would do milling for him to do turning. There was a set of chairs going on. It helped do, so it was whatever came in, we did. If it was woodworking, we did it. And there was no... it could be as basic as a cheap chair reglue, as long as somebody wanted to pay the hourly rate for it, through a Newport block front chest. It didn't matter. It would be anything that came in, and that was great exposure to somebody who was actually working in the trade, doing really high end work, knowing what's good enough and knowing when something's not good enough, and be able to make those judgment calls on the fly and manage employees. It was a huge learning experience, and just, that's something I'll be grateful for forever.
How long were you with him?
He and I probably, I was never there like full time all the way out.
Yeah.
But we probably worked together from about 1995 on some early projects up to, probably 5 or 6 years of just this kind of back and forth, because I went to Dunbar's in 2000. There's these kind of, like, I've been looking back, like I said, this kind of reflection point, look back at the early times, and I wish there were times and folks that I'd worked with that I wish I spent more time with. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, I went there and I was just so hungry to keep learning. There was another gentleman I met who actually went to school with Phil. His name's Ron Turpasso, owned Atwell Furniture Company. He graduated North Bennett in 1969. I graduated in 1994, but he did restoration work, and I went in his shop part-time for years. And again, I wish I spent more time there. And then, but from there, I met another person. I did preservation carpentry work, so I started building doors and all kinds of mold, and I learned the architectural millwork part, and then same thing with Phil, and all of that cycled through, just about 8 or 9 years worth of just all kinds of woodworking. And then I had an opportunity to go teach. And this was the first opportunity with Mike's that I was going to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. I still did all kinds of stuff, still had a shop, still did kind of other commission work. And then I started doing a ton of Windsors, and got into that and enjoyed that for a while. And then I got to a point, it's like, you know what? I've done a lot of Windsors. I love it. But I missed the other woodwork. I was doing less of the other woodwork that I really enjoyed. So then I decided, now's the time to go and move on. And at that point, North Bennett was looking to kind of expand their offerings. Mm-hmm. So Janet, again, she went back, and her and I developed the 3-month intensive workshop that's probably the number one selling workshop that they've had. And we developed that, and we developed some other things. And during that was about a year's worth of process. Then I got offered the job in the full-time program.
I didn't know that you and Janet were so intertwined. Yeah. She was on the show a long time ago. Yeah. We did a show on turning. Yeah. But then we went and had pizza with her afterwards, and she's one of my favorite people to have pizza with. I mean,
she was a huge linchpin to that whole success of that movement of workshops. It was really early on. Like I said, there was really nobody, and then everybody started to spawn out. Mm-hmm. But she kept true to it. She really put forth the energy and effort and care to help foster the instructors and support them in what they needed and help guide them if they didn't know. She was really great. Really
That's
was.
Awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. And for anyone watching the video, you might be able to see the Atwell Furniture Company sign right behind us. Yeah. I knew that sounded familiar. So I think it's super interesting that you were doing and Phil gluing up cheap chairs. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not beneath you.
It's what happens with a lot of furniture repair. And again, it's like, I have this conversation with a lot of aspiring woodworkers that, they poo-poo repair work. Most repair work, if somebody's investing in something, it's usually not the cheap kind of throw-it-away type of chair, but something that might have been built in the 1940s or 50s that their grandparents or their parents or somebody had, but it really doesn't have any market value to it, but it has sentimental value. It has that, so they're making an investment. More times than not, those projects turn into commission projects because you've actually put forth an effort. You've listened to their story. You put care into restoring something that was meaningful. And most kind of common repair things have turned into other good projects from that. Just building relationships. And for me, it's like there's a couple of avenues to start out as a furniture maker or even if you're an established furniture maker, it's not an easy business, right? It takes a certain amount of marketing and skill and all of those different things. So usually, especially in the beginning, you have to be able to offset what you're trying to do, what your wish and your goal is with the reality of making a living. So some people will do other things that maybe might not be their end goal, like building a kitchen cabinet or repairing a dining room chair. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the repair work part of that kept me true to the furniture, and also it made me a better hand tool woodworker because you have to figure out how to be able to fit and patch and fit and color and finishing and all that kind of stuff.
Or get something apart.
Or get it back together or any of that kind of stuff. And it and there's so much of that stuff. And especially now, it's like you don't want to throw this good furniture. Why would you want to throw it away? Yeah. You can it can last whatever, even something that was built with dowels in the 1920s and 30s. I mean, we can go back depending on what somebody wants to make an investment in. You can make it last another 100 years if you wanted to.
Yeah, I dabble in cheap furniture repair, and I learned so much from every piece, just about, and just figuring out a way of. I never have taken on any piece that is worth much money. You know, there was actually a piece that came in that I was suspicious might be worth money.
Yeah.
And Bob and Mike Michelli had me send pictures to a buddy of theirs, and he was like, nope, let's go at it. You
Just
know?
go for it, yeah.
And part of the fun was figuring out how to make this thing structural without pulling the upholstery apart, without pulling the whole thing apart,
Yep.
and doing it on budget.
Yep.
You know, and it really pushed me to be creative.
Yeah.
And that is going to apply to everything else I do. So yeah. That's really interesting. I didn't know that. All right, so let's answer a question.
Okay.
All right. This one is from Julian in France, and multi-part question, but Julian writes in, Dear Ben and cohorts, been watching for years and never asked anything, so here it comes, disorderly. I have been a professional woodworker for 13 years now, and I still haven't managed to produce a single, absolutely, fully true square piece. Should I become a dancer, or could you please come out about this, guys? I'm feeling paranoidally alone here. All right, let's start there.
Okay. So,
and by the way,
yeah.
Julian, I went to his website. I didn't send you. Julian's doing some high-end work.
Yeah.
Julian's not messing around.
Yep.
So, all
good.
right.
Good. I guess it's not a great way to say this, but what is square, right? And what?
Well, if you don't know, Dan,
I know.
Do I have to explain it to you on air?
The way that, I look at building a piece, you're working to the highest tolerance you can. You're trying to make things square. If you're using machinery, you're doing all of the right things. You're hand cutting joints or whatever. But if you're building a chest of drawers, you're going to build the box and you're going to fit the drawers to it. So you work within a tolerance. There is room for error. There goes the train.
Oh, our train.
Yeah.
Our little built-in brake. All right.
So I think about, I do the best I can as I go along. I know there is some tolerance for error in there. Nothing is, I'd say this for every piece that you're going to do from now to the end of time, there's going to be something. There's going to be some mistake or a little bump in the road or something. And then what makes you the professional and how to manage those things is to be able to get through that hiccup and go to the next step and move on. And like I said, the way that we build is we start with the main part, and then we build the other pieces to be able to work with how that one came out. So it's basically it's a build result and a fit process after. So I guess my thing is like I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
If you're a quarter inch out of square, then it's a problem. Then maybe think about dancing. But if it's a 64th, it's like don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So in this Queen Anne chair, I've witnessed quite a few glue ups. Mm-hmm. I've witnessed a lot of shaping and rasping and things like that.
Yeah.
There was one moment that it's probably off. No, it is off camera because there was a conversation, but it kind of messed me up, Dan. Where this isn't talking about square, but this is talking about, chair makers. The problem is not necessarily it being square, but rocking feet.
Yep.
Or unlevel feet. And I had mentioned to you, I said, oh, okay, so, you'll probably level those up afterwards. And you looked at me and said, no, probably not. I thought, oh, he's not going to level them up. He goes, won't need it. And I was like, this guy's confident. Yeah. But one thing that I have realized is that throughout this build is that there's a system that you build everything with. There's an approach that like if I do this way, this should add up to a piece that lies true on all 4 feet.
Yeah.
Or comes out square. Like you use a square when you're gluing up.
Yeah, or measure diagonals or whatever. Yeah, there's some true.
But you're worried about getting it square.
Yeah, of course.
But I've never seen you reach for the square afterwards.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Right. Yep.
And if you got finished with this chair and it did rock, you would trim up a foot.
You would trim up
for
a
the
foot.
record. He didn't have to trim up the foot because
Yeah.
Dan. But it doesn't matter what happened previously.
Right.
You just got to work with what you got, right?
Yeah, and making sure, like I do everything, I have a dry clamp process. And when you dry clamp something together to see how it's going to go, you have all the time in the world to play with the clamps. Like most people, when they clamp, they over tighten things. You need to clamp to seat joints tight and closed. But most people, when they're fussing square, they don't think about, so they move clamps kind of forward and back or side to side to square up a piece, but don't think about up and down. And they add wind to pieces. Like there's all kinds, the clamps are really powerful, not just to close the joints, for making adjustments. So like I say, make sure every single joint that you do closes individually on its own. And then when you bring it together as a whole in a dry clamp process, you're trying to get as square as you can and see where you are. Because if you don't have that target in my mind, like, okay, I could get it perfectly square diagonally, or I could get it within a 64th or a 32nd. When you go to glue it up, if it's not possible to get it square, you could only get it to a 64th or a 32nd, then you're trying to accomplish something that's not possible.
Yeah.
So you want to go in with all of that knowledge, so the glue up shouldn't be stressful. That's the whole. People get so stressed out with glue ups. But if you have a plan, you lay out your parts, you keep track of things, and you know what the end result should be before you even spread glue, then it's.
You had said you set your expectations with the dry glue up.
Yeah, of course.
And that's really spoken. So I mean, for the record, like I feel like my predecessor Ed always referenced things back to a shoot he did with Phil, and I feel like podcast listeners can probably attest to this. I keep referencing things back to something I've discussed or seen here.
Yeah.
As we do episodes, I keep go, well, Dan Faia does this, but everybody's like, Dan Faia, Dan Faia. Yeah. But you're setting that expectation level. Right. And you are on the dry globes. I can promise you, you're measuring for square.
Yeah,
you're checking for wine.
Yeah.
On the dry glue up, and that's further than I have ever gone. I think for me, it's always, okay, everything closes up.
Right.
I've got enough clamps.
Yep.
That's all I need to know. But that's your spot to figure out exactly what you should expect afterwards.
Yeah, it's a dry run, right? Yeah. It's like a test simulator for a pilot, right? You got to make sure you can land the plane before you actually fly one,
I think that's taking a little seriously. All right, so worry not, Julian. Dan, but can you just come right out and say, do you think you've ever built anything truly square?
I doubt it.
Okay. I build ukulele, so nothing square at all. So, all right. Second part of Julian's question. My shop in winter can get down to 5 to 6 degrees Celsius, and then he says, you translate. Which was, you looked it up, about 40.
About 40, 41. Yeah.
Which, of course, prohibits the use of vinylic glues. We're reading that as PVA glue, so type on 1-ish. Type on style. Even though 2 and 3 aren't PVA glues, technically. Wait, I'm getting that mixed. Crap.
When it gets to this,
yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
No,
finish the question first.
Type on 1 is a PVA glue. That's right. It's a vinyl acetate glue.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. There's somebody. Yeah, YouTube. Thanks, YouTube commenters. You set me straight in the comments, please. I've used hide glue and fish glues, but even those have a hard time hardening at these temperatures. Any thoughts? Additives, except heat, of course.
Yeah, that's a tough one. The obvious answer is the heat. I don't have a great piece of advice on that other than the hide glues and the fish glues and the natural glues. While you're working, you might, I don't know if you're heating up surfaces, stuff like that, but basically my concern at a cold temperature is going to be open time and workability. I've worked in some pretty cold shops, things like that. if you have the option, I don't know where your shop is or how close it is to something that is heated, but maybe do a glue up and bring it inside, or if you can glue up in a warmer place, that would be the best. Or I might research something that would actually work better in a colder environment. I don't know enough about adhesives. I don't want to act like I do.
I think that there's definitely got to be epoxies out there.
I was going to say some kind of an epoxy, or even like a polyurethane glue. I don't know what their limitations are.
I didn't think about polyurethane. But the good thing about epoxies is that there's so many other industries that rely on epoxy technology, that there is a glue out there.
Yeah.
Might not be available in your local hardware store, but there is a glue out there that has a working temperature where you need it to be. I think.
And I think the epoxy, like you said, would be good because I think of something like a product like a JB Weld. They make that stuff that goes. You can actually get it to set underwater. Like, there's different ones for different scenarios. I'm not saying put together with JB Weld putties, but there has to be a product that would fit the scenario for like boat builders. Like, there's all different types of environments.
Exactly, because Lord knows there's boat builders in Maine that are not.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Working.
In a heated shop.
Yeah. So, all right. Last part of Julian's question. And this one, I think this is why I said Dan's got to answer this one. Apart from the traditional swearing word, when thumb meets hammer, do you guys talk to yourselves in the shop? And what about? Well, mumbles?
All the time. I constantly talk to myself. And when people ask me about that, I'm like, well, because I want to get the right answer. No, it's just I think it's just habit. I am so used to working by myself. Like, I think a lot of us, kind of work in the shop alone, unless you're lucky to work in a collaborative shop or have other folks around you. That I think just talking out the problem. A lot of times you're setting something up and you're just thinking aloud. And I have those conversations. I'm not talking to my little friend on my shoulder, but it's the rant and rave of the day, or the great songs on the radio, and you're kind of thinking about that stuff. But no, definitely when I work and when I really need to concentrate, I don't have the radio on. Some people can work through that stuff, and I will. I'll talk through we talked about glue ups. I'll talk myself through out loud. All my stuff is laid out. It's like I'm actually teaching a class. I'm just talking like I would normally talk. And I think, you can attest to this. The only way I could get through the video stuff is I just started talking the way that I talk to students.
It was like I was in a classroom.
That's how I have to manage this stuff. And that's how my brain processes it. So, you should talk to yourself in your workshop, and it's perfectly fine. And if it helps you be able to kind of come up with a solution or get yourself comfortable about what you're going to get into, I think that's, for me, it's natural. Maybe it's crazy, but I do it all the time. You do. It's fun. All right, let's move on to a question from Scott. Scott writes in, I'm having trouble centering my hollow chisel mortiser. I use the X method, mark a horizontal line, and then 2 opposing 45s to get center. I have used a marking gauge and kept adjusting until it lands on the same mark. Then adjust my XY axis table to hit center, and then it's not center. And he states he's using a Rikon mortiser with dual axis table. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of what he's trying to hit exact center for. If we're trying to get center and hit a single square hole, I think about mortising with the hollow chisel mortiser. I use it quite a bit in the work that I do. And just so everyone knows, there's a bandsaw in here, and there's a hollow chisel mortiser in here, and a bench grinder, of course. Yeah, and so I think about, if something needs to be exactly centered, if you're doing mortise and tenon and joinery, let's talk about that first. If I wanted to get a mortise that was dead center in something that was thicker, I'm usually going to cut the mortise first. I'm going to fit the tenon to whatever the thickness came out to be. So if it's super important that you're dead on center, you could put it in the mortiser, and you could cut from one side, flip it around, and cut from the other side, if it's possible, if you have parallel surfaces, right? usually I'm not too concerned about something being dead centered because, again, I can fit the joint. So that, to me, when I do a mortise and tenon joint, I think about a reference face. That everything is, I'm trying to get that to align when I'm all said and done. So I lay out and I set up the mortiser. So I'm cutting from that reference face and I have a distance. And when I go to the table saw or lay out by hand, however you're going to cut that tenon, I use that reference face as a guide. That's the important one. That first tenon cheek that I cut is called the reference cheek for that reason, because that's going to set that distance to make it perfect. And the other cheek is called the fitting cheek because that's just going to get the thickness right. So I don't know if this answers the question, but when I set up the mortiser, I care more that the chisel is parallel to the fence, right? Because I want a consistent straight mortise. I don't want to have little crooked teeth. So I have a nice smooth mortise surface. And I don't use a square for that. And I don't take a little square and put it up against the fence. I actually use my 12-inch blade out of my square, and I actually put it up against the chisel, and I can visually see how parallel it is. And that's, to me, that's more accurate than the little bit, because if I put a little 1/4-inch chisel in there, you can only see that little 1/4 inch, but if I put a 12-inch blade on it, it's extending it, so it's usually way more than accurate for what I need to do. So I don't know if that answers the question, because I don't know if I get it 100%.
Yeah, but you skipped over like the mind-blowing thing that you do when you're squaring up that chisel.
Yeah.
You have a combination wrench.
Yeah.
Handy.
Yeah.
So if you are squaring up a 1/4-inch chisel, you have a 1/4-inch combination wrench that you grab the chisel with to turn it.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that's really hard for people to do is they grab that chisel and they try to move it little micro amounts with their fingers because you have to have some tension on it. So I leave a little tension on it, but it's really hard to move by hand. But again, I can put the open end wrench on it to the right size and I can actually have a little leverage and tweak it. And actually much more easy to adjust. Yeah, no, that's something I don't know where I don't think I've seen anybody do that. It's just something that made sense. I was trying to tweak it a little bit. Probably really early on, and they go too far. And I was probably talking to myself in the shop. And I was like, how can I do this? Like,
and then a third voice
said. And the third voice said, a wrench, stupid, a wrench. But, it worked really well, and I do it all the time.
Yeah.
So,
I know Pekovic will, if he's trying to center a mortise on the hollow chisel mortise, he does that thing where he cuts an overlapping mortise, from one side plunges the chisel, then flips it over and then
other side.
Into the other side, and then you have a visual representation of double how far you're
off.
You're off.
Yep.
But a mortiser is not necessarily a tool that you, like you said, you use it with reference faces in mind. You use it with, like, I guess if you were doing, stub tenons on the table saw or something like that, that's the technique that center matters.
Yeah, and I think the way I woodwork and the way I think about it frustrates a lot of people because the numbers and exactness of things aren't critical to me. What I care about is the end result and how so something being dead center a lot of times doesn't really affect what I'm trying to do. So I think more about process for accuracy in a way that's going to give me the result that I need rather than an accuracy a target I don't need to hit, because then it's a little harder. Like when I go to cut something, I don't want to be measuring something with a pair of dial calipers and try to get something to match. If I'm going to create that part to make it fit, I don't care if it's this thick or that thick, because one has to fit the other. So the way that I think about it, the way that I approach it is really basic and really simple. And I admire the people that can talk in thousandths of an inch for this stuff, but those numbers don't even exist in the way that I think about woodworking. I just can't, it's just, and what I really love about what we do is you can be super, super accurate and build something that is perfectly square or whatever you want to say, and look great at the end and not even have to know numbers. You can work from sticks, like really basic things like we've talked about. It can be very simple, be very accurate and beautiful. So,
yeah. I mean, in the chair, so in this video series, you are copying a chair of Phil's.
Yep.
And you go from making story sticks and patterns off of the chair to a full-size drawing, and then in the next series, you're taking that full-size drawing and making your version
Making a chair.
of the chair.
Yep.
And at no point along the way do you, I think you mentioned that the legs are normally 17 inches apart.
Yeah, I probably
that-
gave you
that's-
common
Yeah.
dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at no point along the way did you know or mention how tall or how long anything is here. And, you set a bevel gauge to the inside seat angle, and you're just like, that is what it is. Do I know what it is? I have no idea.
I don't know what the angle is. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. The Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport, Maine offers workshops to immerse yourself in woodworking with the guidance of outstanding professional woodworkers. Whether you're a skilled hand or just starting out, 1- and 2-week-long workshops offer instruction in furniture design, hand-cut joinery, machine use, carving, turning, finishing, and more. The benefits of studying at CFC include small class sizes, 24-hour workshop access, and world-class instructors including Adrian Ferzuti, Larissa Huff, Beth Ireland, and Garrett Hack. Visit woodschool.org for more information or call 207-594-5611 to register. All right, we're back. So we had just kind of brought it up, but this chair video, there was one aspect of it that I wanted to not sell to the audience, to the podcast listening audience, but I don't anticipate a lot of people making a Queen Anne chair necessarily, right? But the entire time we were filming this, I kept sitting there saying, oh, I'm going to use that for this.
Right.
Or I'm going to, and there's so many lessons to be learned in just about any woodworking project. But in this project in particular, is this a chair that you teach often, or?
That style, the Queen Anne, is a good starting point for a lot of folks. Now, the chair that we do in the video is a little bit more complex than maybe the first Queen Anne chair somebody might do. This one has a balloon seat, it's got stretchers, it has a little bit more kind of advanced work going on. But there are a lot of traditional chairs. And what kind of sets this aside, we talk about this a little bit, but these chairs, the back posts we call parallel posts, so it keeps kind of the back square, where some later chairs, Chippendale chairs and beyond, they start having kind of canted posts. So it adds more angle issues and a little bit more complexity to them. So a chair like this, to me, like you said, it's really not about a Queen Anne chair. It's about processes. It's about thinking about how do you maybe design some joinery around how to join curves together? How do you think about accurately building? And again, you can design anything you want within that framework. If you built this as a bunch of squares, how you design or decide to cut away the squares is your own interpretation, right? So it can look very, very traditional, or it could be a very modern looking chair. You don't have to do cabriole legs, right? They could be turned legs, they could be tapered legs, they could be whatever. You can carve them into dolphins. It doesn't really matter whatever that is. But I think about these being building blocks. And when I was learning about how to build furniture, what really excited me is I would look at these kind of sculptural pieces, things that don't have any flats left in them, and wonder how these things were done. And when I realized there were just blocks of wood, started as blocks of wood with references and ways to lay out joinery, and that, whether it's an angle or whether it's straight or square or whatever it is, you're just going to learn how to lay out those lines, cut and pair to those lines and fit that joint, and then everything else kind of works to it. So learning how to design, how to build the things you're trying to design, to me, that's the value of this. So hopefully if somebody wants to watch this time and invest the time in here, whether you like period furniture or not, I think the techniques and the processes that we do, like you said, there might be that one thing that you might see in the shaping portions of that. They're like, oh boy, that tool could work for these other things that I'm doing, or there might be something that just clicks. And like I feel like that with myself with my woodworking. It's like I will always be a student because I love woodworking. I love watching woodworking, reading about it. And I always pick something up. And again, whether I like that style or whether I'm more interested in, is it really good work? And is it a good process that I feel like I could use? That's how, and that's hopefully what this will do for folks.
No, I really think it will because like I said, I went back to my shop and I was carving an ukulele neck and saying like, oh, I'm going to use that technique. There's nothing on here that looks anything like a ukulele neck, but it helped me. And, that's one thing that was super exciting to me. And now also though, I am starting to look at Queen Anne chairs or period furniture in general. We were just down in Williamsburg and I was like, oh, that looks fun to build because I feel like I now have a better idea of the processes required to go to, and all of a sudden it's like my horizon's like a little bit wider, where it's like I can look at a piece because you look at this chair and there's one flat, really, except for chamfers if you want to. Yeah, there's chamfers everywhere, but like the very back of the back seat or of the back rail has a flat, and that's about it. Yeah. But from there, you're able to extrapolate everything from that, and that's another reason why I'm really excited. We went to the pains of doing the video on doing a full-size drawing too, because you are really building the chair in your head while doing that drawing, right?
Yeah, and it's like that to me. That's the value of it. Whether folks do their own drawings or not, or whether they're buying plans, the value of the plan is somebody figured out the build. Right. So if you're at a level that you want to design, whether it's a reproduction or a new design, but you want to do that, the whole point of either drawing on paper or whether you're drawing on the computer, it's the same thing. You're building it on paper. I'll use the paper terminology. You're building it on paper. You're coming up with a process, and you're trying to come up with an order of business. So basically, you might not catch every pitfall, but hopefully you're catching most of them. So you don't build yourself in a corner or figure you got to a point that something's not going to work. You don't have enough thickness to make that curve because you didn't, compensate for a joint or a curve or something like that. And I think in this chair, we talk about that in the drawing where that balloon seat comes around. Those tenons, it's really easy to shape into those tenons if you don't have them in the right place. And if without that, you're kind of shaping in the wind, right? You have no idea if you're going to hit that or not. And like the post tenon, same thing. It has an angle to it to allow you to be able to shape around the corner. So it's like preparing for a glue up. It's like you want to have as much of the problem solved before you go to see what the target is and try to do the best you can to hit it.
And one other element that you did on the drawings that I would never have thought of. And now it's like, oh, that's you added glue blocks onto the drawing. And there's certain parts where you're drawing it and this is going to be the shape, but I'm going to draw this little section here so that I can leave that piece of wood on at the bandsaw
for clamping.
Yeah. And it's like this beautiful reminder to yourself of like, I got to clamp this up. How am I going to clamp it up? I need a clamp to go across here. Let's leave a flat here.
And it's super easy. If you don't put it on there, people just cut that thing away and it's like you're ready to glue up and you're like, oh boy, joint's not closing. How do I clamp it? Right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to cut it away afterwards. So just that foresight, and that comes from having done it before and being shown how to do that. But any type of that work, if you're trying to figure out how to clamp this thing up without success and you're kind of jury rigging all these things, just probably wasn't thought out ahead of time to get to that point. Most things should have some sort of solution that's not crazy and over the top.
Well, and I personally have never done a true full-size plan. I think I've done large-scale plans, but that full-size plan really helps you to exactly how long that thing needs to be because it's over there on the piece of paper. Like, just measure it off that.
Yeah, and scale drawings work really well, especially if things are flat and square, tapered, or if they're more straight shapes and whatnot. When you get into curves, like I can't draw a scale drawing of a cabriolet because I need to produce a pattern to put on the wood to go to the bandsaw. So for me to draw, I might draw something in scale if I'm trying to design something just to get proportion and get some scale and some size. But I want to go to the full-size paper. Number one, because I don't draft on a computer, I have to be able to read the ruler, and it's easier for me. I know 12 inches, right? I know how I work. So when it's full size, it's true to size. When I measure a 5/16 mortise, that's the mortise I'm going to go cut. It's true, But I can pull all my curve patterns off of it. I'm going to draft it once and figure it out. And again, the way that I do my plans, like everything comes together in the same point. So I can see how things intersect. I don't do exploded views or whatever. And I think some of that comes, I think the exploded views and things happen when people purchase plans. It's helpful because you can visualize how it goes. And I think the more that you learn how to look at plans, you need that a little bit less. But, I think whatever's helpful. But for me, my drawings aren't beautiful. I'm not an artistic drafts person. I try to get as much information as I need, as quickly as I can, and as thoroughly as I need for the build. That's what I try to do.
All right. Well, let me just say this. I think I'm really proud of the video we did. Now it's on our hands to screw up. I'm really proud of the work you did, and me being here for it. But I think it's kind of like, just for the listeners and unlimited members, it's the next level video workshop for us, and it's going to be a doozy. I'm not sure how many parts it's going to be yet, but it's coming. It's going to be big. And we're going to have the plans available that you drew up. Those will be available for unlimited members. And then also another really cool aspect is that the chair that you are duplicating, Phil's chair, there are plans that Phil drew. Yeah. For that chair.
It's not, my assumption is it's either exactly the same or a very close same time period, 1980. So Society of American Period Furniture Makers has a catalog of Phil's drawings. Yeah. So actually a couple of friends of Phil's, after he had passed, had them all scanned. They fundraised, a lot of support from the woodworking community. A lot of listeners probably contributed to that. Yeah. So they scanned all of Phil's plans, and they're available for free. You can go download them. Yeah. And I actually did that, once I knew that and I wanted to see this chair, I could see it on the computer screen. I actually downloaded it. I sent it to Staples. It cost me $7 to print it out. And there it was. You don't need to have this. You can just, here's Phil's work. You can see all of these things. His drawings are beautiful. Yeah.
I'm going to argue yours are better, though. Because you did it a little bit differently. And then looking at them both, I said, okay, if I was going to build it, I'm going to build it off Dan's. Phil's are good, though.
No, they're great.
Yeah. All right, let's do one last question. This question is from Chuck. My question is about wedged round through tenons. So Windsor style joinery, I guess. I enjoy making 3-legged stools and have been lucky enough to sell quite a few. I know what is ideal when fitting a tenon into a mortise, but what is acceptable? Sometimes I cut my tenons a tad too thin or uneven, and there is a decent amount of slop in the joint. Once I drive a wedge home, it feels very secure. Does the wedge adequately secure a loose tenon? I've been considering the Veritas tapered tenon cutter and reamer. With practice, I think I can nail the tenon width better off the lathe. But at the moment, I end up with some step humps.
Stepped humps. Okay. The wedge will help. My worry with a through wedged joint, whether it's a round tenon or even a square tenon, if it doesn't have a good fit, when you're driving the wedge in, the wood's not supported, right? It's trying to flare open, and if it's, I don't know how loose we're talking with these joints, but if it's loose enough, you can drive that wedge in far enough that it'll start to split whatever you're trying to wedge.
Because the base of it is not.
Because it's not actually held by the mortise.
Okay.
So that would be more of my concern. It's like, yeah, if you drive wedges in there, you'll get it. It might be a little gappy or whatever. But something that you could consider, again, you could get better on the lathe. You could have some kind of tapered reamer and pointer. That would help solve the problem too, because you could drill the hole and you could ream the hole, and that's just going to be a function of how far you ream in. It's going to be fairly tight and consistent. But the way that I do it on the lathe is a lot of people turn on the lathe and they set calipers to a dimension and they're working off a number rather than working off their drill bit. I want to turn or set my calipers to my drill bit, or like in the video, we do a little turning. We talk about, tenons, that I take a block of wood. I drill 2 holes in that block of wood. One of the holes I bandsaw open so it becomes the caliper of the drill bit I'm going to use. I turn it, I fit it really close off the lathe. When I take it off the lathe, I can see how it fits in there. It's usually a little snug. And then I can also take that little block that I cut open with the bandsaw, and I could actually put the tenon in there, and I can go around there with a file and fine tune it if I need to. So I think there's ways to fit it a little bit better. Maybe it takes a little longer. Maybe you leave it a little heavy on the lathe, not a ton, but if you can get it really close or just tight off the lathe, I'd rather be a little tight to take some off than be loose and rely on the wedge. So
it occurred to me as I was reading it, it doesn't sound like he's doing tapered.
No, he's not doing tapered.
Yeah, okay.
He's considering doing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Because I guess the upside of the tapered is it keeps going in until the taper bottoms out.
Yeah, like the taper
will fit eventually.
Fit. Yeah, some of the struggles that people have with the tapered reamer, depending on how you're doing it and how you're fixturing it, is that if you're a little sloppy with the tapered reamer, it doesn't seat well either. So it takes a fair amount. If you're going to set it up, and you're going to do, some people will do it on the drill press, so everything is identical and stuff like that. But you can introduce human error if you're doing it by hand with a bit brace or a hand drill. So it takes a little bit of ability to make sure everything is flat and that you have good contact. But it would rectify the problem from, one size hole to a tenon not fitting it, right? One or the other, because it will seat, like you said, it's tapered. It gets bigger as it goes down, so it's going to seat.
Do you ever do the when you're turning a tenon on the lathe?
Yeah.
Do you ever do the thing with an open end wrench or?
I used to because I thought it was really convenient, but again, if it really is dictated by the drill bit.
Yeah.
And every drill bit, if you have a bunch of drill bits, they're not all the same. 1/4 inch isn't 1/4 inch, or you know what I mean? Some are, might be a slight metric, but they're labeled standard or whatever. There's just slight differences.
Wait. There's a spectrum of slight metric.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not exactly half inch or whatever it is, right? The knockoff version of this, but I'm less concerned about the actual dimension than the fit, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, that accuracy. The target accuracy is that it has to fit. The numbers, it doesn't matter. So I'd rather choose the bit I want to cut with and the one I'm going to use in the project, and I'm going to turn in whatever way you want to work. If your open end wrench fits that drill bit, right? You're done, right? Or if you like turning calipers or the gallopers or whatever, all of that stuff is good. It's whatever you're comfortable with.
Wait, are they called gallopers?
They're called gallopers, yeah. It's Pete
Galbert's caliper thing? Is it called a galloper?
It's called a galloper.
I have one. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, it somehow got cooler. What's your go-to tool for turning a tenon?
So I use a parting tool, right? So I part in so I can get my dimensions, and I usually get really close with it. It depends on how long the tenon is, too, if you have to do that. And most tenons that you're doing are, I guess it really depends. You're doing a through joint if he's making stools, 3-legged stools. If your top is 1.5 inches thick, you get a pretty long tenon, even if you're turning it in. So you could put a scraper on that, right? So I usually part in, try to get my dimensions pretty close to where I want to be. A lot of times I just use the parting tool back and forth. Sometimes I'll take my skew, lay it down on its side, use it as a scraper just to get things flat. I don't sand them. because I don't want to compress any fibers or do anything or change any shapes. I want it to really be flat more than I do as far as the dimension. But I mean, you could use a square scraper or something like that too. But I want to part down, get really close, and then however you decide to fine tune it, it's kind of up to the maker.
I was wondering because, I forgot what you used on the video, but because I don't think I would be able to turn an accurate tenon of any length with, like the diamond parting tool, that skinny little parting
quarter-inch parting tool or whatever.
Yeah, I think that would be beyond me and my turning skills.
But you could part in at 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 locations to your dimension. And if you do that a couple of times, you're just connecting the dots, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You could do it, Ben. I know you could.
Well, I use David Duyard taught me when I did that box class, and it was one of those like, oh, that tool, okay, I'm going to go buy it, But it's a 3/8 inch. I believe it's a 3/8 inch. It's a beater parter tool.
Yeah.
So it's a wide parting tool.
Yeah. And
I thought maybe for Chuck that would, because if I was doing like an inch long tenon with a parting tool, that's too many opportunities for me to screw it up. And whereas at least with a 3/8 inch, I've got 1/3 less the opportunities to screw it up.
Sure. Sure, something like that. There's also tenon cutters.
Yeah.
Right? So you could think about adjustable tenon cutters. Veritas makes them. They have all different types of things. You can chuck it on the lathe. You can do it on a drill press. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. And that beating tool. There's another one I saw years and years and years ago. I think Brian Boggs might have been showing me. It's called a Badan. Is that a similar thing? They're pretty wide. They're big, flat chisels. They only have one bevel on them, so they're kind of used like a parting tool. He was turning a lot of tenons with the tool. I could have the name wrong, but it was a tool similar to that. And I'll bet you the one he had was 3/8 or a 1/2 inch wide.
Okay. Yeah, it's double-sided, just like a regular parting tool. But 3/8 of an inch wide. But yeah, it was a box chair, so maybe it was what he uses. Or
something similar, yeah.
So, well, Dan, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Dan's kind of saving my butt right now because I went on vacation last week and I was like, what am I going to do for the podcast? And I was like, I'm going to be in Rollins for Thursday. Yeah. If I could turn around quick, that would be a good show. But I'm excited for this video series. I'm excited for you with the Cartouche Award, and I'm excited for this shop space and your classes you're giving. The T-top thing looks super cool, and I really want to do that. I have no idea why, but it just looks like that'd be such a challenge, and a lot of learning to be had in that class.
Yeah.
And then, are you doing the candle stand coming up?
Yeah, that's gonna. So, in a couple of weeks, we're doing a pie crust tray, and then we do the federal candle stand workshop.
The federal candle stand. If it's not on your Instagram, try and get it up soon because it's
on there.
Beautiful table.
Yeah, it's on there.
But okay, so where can people find out about your classes and your stuff?
So the best place to go for really the most information is the website. It's danielfaia.com. That's going to have basically my commission work. It's going to have the workshop schedule. It's going to talk about all the different classes going on, some of the places I've been, the articles I've written for Fine Woodworking, like all of that's basically, everything me.
You've got a pretty extensive blog on there too, with techniques and things like that.
Yeah, so the blog is there too, and I encourage people. Again, I'm also on Instagram, Dan Faia Woodcarver on Instagram. What I try to do is I try to have different content. Sometimes it's just the same. The blog I really want to offer to people, the people that want to go there, is give more kind of technique and process, and I can be a little bit more thorough with some things than I can on Instagram.
Yeah, of course.
So I try to share some content there and try to be active with that. But the blog, hopefully, it's just another avenue for people to learn, and I try to post something every week. Sometimes, I try to keep it good and fresh, but I try to have more kind of how-to content than I do, promotional content.
Yeah.
So
no, you just did a upholstery blog.
Yeah.
For a Queen Anne chair of all pieces.
Yep.
And so check out Dan's stuff. Follow him on Instagram, and if you're in the area, or if you're not, New Hampshire, this I love this area. I love this building. I love everything about this place. It's a wonderful place to be. Rollinsford, New Hampshire, Dover area.
Yeah, Dover, Portsmouth. I mean, if you're thinking about visiting the area, there's a lot of history here. If you're traveling with family, there's lots of things for them to do as well. And
good hiking
and all kinds of good stuff.
Cool. Well, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do an outro.
Yep.
So that I don't know why I announced that. If I keep it, now it's all weird. That does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have any questions or comments you'd like answered on the show, send them into shoptalkathon.com. If you are watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. If you have the time, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, as it helps spread the word to other podcast listeners. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening. I haven't done the intro and outro live in 4 years.